Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Behavioral Sciences Licensing Committee meeting. So today is June 25th, 2021, and the time is 1:30 p.m. And this meeting is held on the WebEx platform, and this is due to the governor's executive order N2520. So for this time, I would like to have, let's have introduction first. And we'll start with the board members. And I am Christina Wong. I'm an LCSW member and the chair of this committee. And I will have Diana.
Hi, Diana Herwick. I'm an LPC member.
Thank you. And Wendy?
Hi, Wendy Strack. I'm a public member.
Thank you. And let's go to the staff. Steve?
Hi, Steve Sodergren, Board of Behavioral Sciences. I am the Executive Officer. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much. And Roseanne?
Hi, I'm Roseanne Helms. I'm the Legislative Manager for the board.
Thank you. Christy?
Hi, Christy Berger, Regulatory Analyst for the board.
Thank you. And then Sabina.
Sabina Knight, Legal Counsel for the board, and Ms. Chair, Madam Chair, I would remind you to go back to establish our quorum first.
We should. So let's finish up the introduction. Christina.
I'm Christina Kitamura, Administrative Analyst for the board.
Okay, so let's establish a quorum. Now everybody know who we are.
Okay, here's roll call. Christina Wong,
Here.
Wendy Strack,
Here.
Diana Herwick.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. So the very first thing that I would like to introduce our new member is Dr. Diana Herwick. And so she is an LPCC member, like she mentioned. And so welcome to the board. Actually, welcome to the committee.
Thank you.
And I also want to announce that Susan Friedman, she participated in our licensing committee, a few times. And so she will be reassigned to the other commitments. So welcome, Diana, and thank you, Susan. So at this time, let's see, I think we can certainly, do the consent calendar, but at the same time, should we have the moderator to really explain the Q&A function first? Moderator?
I can certainly do that.
Yes.
So for today's public comment period, we will be utilizing both the Q&A feature in WebEx, which you can access by locating the question mark inside of a square, clicking on that and typing comment, or I would like to make a comment into the text field and submitting that. Or you can also utilize the hand raise feature, which you can activate by locating the small hand icon on your screen, typically located at the bottom of the participant panel, and clicking on that. I would ask that if you use the hand raise feature to please make sure you again lower your hand after you've made your comment. We will be taking comments in the order that they are received. And so I do ask for your patience as we work through those, as sometimes our comment periods can get long. And with that, I will turn the floor back over to Christina.
Thank you so much, moderator. And so I also want to mention that we will be taking the agenda out of order. So the item number 5, the overview of the board's licensing process, is a presentation. And so we would have that presentation after, we finish item number 3, the consent calendar. So, that's how we're going to do it. So at this point, let's go go to our item number 3, the consent calendar, and that is the discussion and possible approval for March 26, 2021 committee meeting minutes. So any discussion from the board member? No, I see no. And let's put a motion on the floor, and then we can open up for the public comment. So I make a motion to approve the March 26, 2020 committee meeting minutes. And I need a second.
And I'll make that second,
Thanks, Wendy. So
since
let's-
Diana wasn't here.
Yes.
Can I jump in there? You might want to change that motion just a slight bit. I do have one correction. On page 1, I demoted Steve to interim executive officer. I do apologize, Steve. Steve is the executive officer, so I'm going to make that change.
Well, thank you for promoting me.
So
Anytime.
I'll just make a very quick, amendment, and Wendy, you can decide if you want to second that, so that would be the approval with the, with the amendment.
Yes, I still second it.
Absolutely. And, and Steve, we know that, whatever the written title, we know that you're always going to be the EO. So, okay, so let's go to the public comment. So, moderator, would you please open the panel?
This is the moderator. I've opened the Q&A panel. If you'd like to make a comment on the meeting minutes that are up for approval, please click on either the Q&A icon on your screen and type comment into the text box, or utilize that hand raise feature. And just as a reminder, comments today will be limited to 3 minutes.
Seeing none.
We do actually
yes,
have one.
there's one. Yes.
Actually, we have 2.
Okay.
Jen Alley will be the first one. And let me get my computer to cooperate. Jen, your line is open. You will have 3 minutes.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Jennifer Alley with the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. And I'm looking at one of the motions that was made, and on the roll call vote, it has Susan Friedman voting yay and then also has her absent. And so I didn't understand how it would be both unless she voted, and then I was just questioning, was that the recommendation that is the motion accurate? Recommend to the board to require associates to take a 6-hour law and ethics course at each renewal period and delete the 12-hour ethics course requirement?
Yeah, I think that is the motion because I think I move it because that's my suggestion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but then the absent part of it is, yeah.
I'll make that correction.
So I think it should be, I think it's more of an eventual recommendation to the board, not, it wasn't meant to be like right away. It was more like go back and draft the language and then, recommend to the board at some point, possibly that. So, but I don't think we can change the motion. That was the motion. I don't think we can change it in the minutes, but I don't think that the intent of the motion was for it to go immediately to the board.
Yeah, so it's about who is, is recommending to who. So, so we do have a motion, but we know that the implementation wise, it wouldn't be so fast going to the board.
Can I just confirm that Susan was present for that particular vote? So I will remove the absent check.
Okay. Very good. Good
Right.
catch.
And
Jen.
our next comment comes from Christine Nguyen. Christine, your line is open. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hey, so I just wanted to check in and make sure that this was the correct time for the public to speak on any issue, or am I missing the mark and jumping the gun a little bit?
So this particular time is the discussion for the, motion of the consent calendar. So the public comments regarding, things that of your concern, or not on the agenda, will be done at the end of the meeting, at the later part of the meeting.
Got it. Just wanted to make sure of that. And attendees would not have their cameras on, or there's not really an option to?
Correct. There's no cameras for attendees.
Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And if I can please ask you to lower your hand.
All right. Thank you.
That concludes the comments.
Very much. Thank you very much, moderator. So it looks like we do have another minor change. So, now, so I can withdraw my past motion and then I can make another new motion to include those couple of the changes, the change of the AEO title to EO, and then also to take away the absence, of
We could just say approve the minutes as amended.
Perfect.
And I'll second that.
Yes, thank you so much. So let's call roll. Christina?
Okay, Diana Herwick,
Yes.
Wendy Strack,
Yes.
Christina Wong,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you very much. So at this time, let's move on to the presentation of the board's licensing process. So Steve, take it away.
Great, thank you. And Shelley, do you have that slideshow presentation? Perfect, thank you. And I guess I'll have to, can I actually move those slides? Oh, I can. Thank you very much. That's cool.
Hang on. You can move them, but they're not moving on our end until I give you the presenter role. So stand by and I will do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Shelley. Appreciate it. So, sometimes we get it.
Currently, we
Sometimes
see the title
go ahead.
slide.
Sorry?
Currently, we see the title slide.
Yeah, and then I can, there's
Yep,
the
perfect.
second slide. Okay, perfect. So a lot of the times we get in these conversations in the committee and we, especially with this licensing committee, we were thinking that we might take for granted that there might be people that don't really understand the full process and how you actually go through the process of getting licensed and how you go through the process through the board. So what we wanted to do is kind of give a really quick overview of kind of the touch points where an associate would be interacting with the board, some of the possible issues that we see that happens during the process in regards to being an applicant and what kind of problems there are. We wanted to highlight or go through this process to kind of highlight what the conversations we've been talking about. We've been talking about the 6-year rule, 12-hour law and ethics exam, 12-hour law and ethics course for the law and ethics exam retake and such like, and things like that. So hopefully through this process, you'll get just a real basic overview to kind of accentuate, the conversations we'll have later on. I'll go through the process, and if you have any questions, I think I'll pause occasionally to take some questions, clarifying questions, and we'll go that way. So to begin, really, we're looking at 5 steps towards licensure. The first thing you do, we're not going to talk about what type of education you need, what qualifies your degree or not. It's really basic here. The first step, though, is to actually obtain a master's degree. And once you obtain a master's degree, then you will actually register with the board. And that's so you can actually begin accruing supervised hours. Your next step, the third step, is during that process of while you're a registrant, you will have to take the law and ethics exam to renew your license, to renew your registration. And then after you collect all your hours, your 3,000 hours, you will apply for licensure. And in fact, we call it the application for licensure, but I look at that as like the application for the clinical exam. We do call it application for licensure because people coming from out of state might already have that clinical exam. So that's why really what we're discussing here is people that have a degree in state and are going through the process in state. This is like the full process. So after you apply for licensure, we will review your hours and make sure that you've got all the specific education requirements done and the experience requirements done. And once we approve that, you can take your clinical exam. And once you take your clinical exam and pass, then you can apply for your initial license, and we will send you on your way as a fully licensed individual. So those are kind of the 5 steps. Now let's go a little more in depth in each one of those. Master's degree, I just put this up here. I know it's very tiny, sorry about that. But for the LMFT, we have some of the degrees we just require that they are accredited through certain accrediting agencies. COAMPT is one of the ones for MFT. If you're going for social work, we're looking at the Council on Social Work Education. If you have a degree from those, we will accept it. LMFT and LPCC have additional kind of requirements, not requirements, but degrees that we will actually accept if they are approved by a regionally or national institution accrediting agency that is recognized by the United States Department of Education, and also an education institution approved by the California Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education. So the master's degree, sometimes you might need additional coursework depending on the age of your degree or just the contents of your degree. I'm not going to really spend too much time on that because most importantly, I want to get to the registrant. After you graduate, your next step is to apply for a registration with the board. And that process, really what you're doing is you're just submitting an application along with your transcripts from your school. You have to do a live scan fingerprint so we can check back, do your background check. And for the LMFT and LPCCs, we require a degree program cert. Now, the certifications that are handed in, it's a certification that's filled out by the school, and the school verifies that the student has completed a program that complies with the California laws, and that the candidate was notified that the degree coursework that they took was designed, or the coursework they took was designed to meet the requirements of California. So it assists us in making sure that they did meet the requirements for education. That is currently, we raised the fee, that's a $150 fee. And right now, when they submit that application, it takes approximately, I think we're at about a 30-day processing period, and this is a really high time for us right now because of graduation. Once you get a registration, you are allowed to collect supervised experience hours, and you'll need to collect 3,000. Each registration is valid for 6 years. Now, that's a really important thing to look at. So it's 6 years in total. You can renew it on an annual basis for 5 times. Once that 6 year is done, then you can actually apply for a subsequent registration. And the subsequent registration, there is not much additional requirements other than having to have passed the law and ethics exam. That's one of the requirements to get that subsequent registration. And the caveat of the subsequent registration is that you cannot practice in a non-exempt setting. So private practice and stuff, you would not be able to gain hours as a registrant in that type of setting. One of the things I forgot to highlight here, one of the bullet points there is when you get your registration, you have to renew it every year. And to renew your registration, you have to have participated in the law and ethics exam. Participated or have passed. So if you get a registration, you take the law and ethics exam, and you pass the exam, you no longer have to take the law and ethics exam. You can renew those consecutive times. If you fail, you actually you can take the exam over every 90 days, but there's a requirement that you have to take a 12-hour course to be able to get back in the exam. Kind of jumping over, I think I might be talking about this later on, but let's go ahead. There's a question.
Oh, Steve, I just want to, on my end, the slides aren't changing. I'm only seeing
Thank you
master.
very much.
Is that?
Got wrapped up in, okay, sorry there.
Thank you.
Got wrapped up in that. So, yes, so as a registrant, to renew, you have to take the law and ethics exam. If you pass, you can renew with no problem here on out. If for some reason you fail the exam that first time, you can still actually take the exam every 90 days until you reach that renewal period. When you submit your retake application after that next renewal period, you would have to show proof that you've taken a 12-hour law and ethics course to be able to get back in the exam. Once you do that on your second renewal period, you can take the exam every 90 days until, if you fail it again, you have to follow the process over again. Submit the 12-hour course work certification with a retake, with your retake application. that's one of the things we're going to be talking about today. And so it has been, it's been one of my crusades to try to figure out a better way to do that because it's very confusing. One of the other things that we will be talking about, and it's a very big topic for registrants, is we have what's called the 90-day rule. So the 90-day rule, in effect, it will allow you to practice as an associate. You don't have your associate registration yet, but you can actually start collecting hours towards that if you send in your application for registration within 90 days of your conferral date, your degree conferral date. And this is something new that we just put in place about a year ago. You have to be fingerprinted by the agency where you are gaining the hours. So what this looks like to a registrant, first of all, I believe a long time ago, this was put into place to kind of make up for some of the delays we were having, either the board was having or the students were having getting their transcripts sent over to the board. And so they were being penalized, for things that were really out of their control, and they wanted to start working. So that's why the 90-day rule came into effect. So what this means is that a registrant, if they have employment somewhere, they have to make sure that they have a live scan fingerprint form from the agency they're collecting hours in. So they'll have to retain that until they apply for licensure. And once they apply for licensure, we need to see that to be able to count those days, those hours that were collected within those 90 days. So hopefully we tell them, keep copies, keep the scans, keep everything, because it's one little piece of paper that they have to collect and hand in, and it usually takes about, within 3 years or something, they have to make sure that when they apply for licensure, they have that. So it's very important. Little bit, I have the next slide. Just wanted to give you a snapshot. If you haven't seen our board stats before and such, kind of looking at how many applications we received. This is for this year, fiscal year, so we're still not done with the year, but this was pulled like last week. And you can see that initial applications, 7,472 initial applications this year we had for registrations. And the subsequent registrations, we had 1,453. I wanted to show you that just so you can see the numbers of the amount of subsequent registrations we received on a yearly basis. I think that's a pretty good indicator. That's pretty average, the subsequent registration numbers. And just to put a comparison in that, you can see the registrant population and kind of get an idea of how that, how many like subsequent registrations that the percentage is pretty low. So on that. Is there any questions so far? I know I'm throwing out a lot of stuff and I might be kind of rambling on okay. Good. Okay, so we got the registration. So that is the first part in the whole process of getting licensed, getting your registration. Once you get your registration, it's sent out in the mail. You can begin collecting those hours. Well, you can begin collecting those hours outside of 90 days. So what I have the next slide is what I want to talk about is kind of what issues, working with applicants or working with candidates, what we usually see is kind of some of the issues that are faced. One of the biggest one is candidates or applicants or registrants, actually, registrants forget to renew. And there can be extensive times before they realize that they haven't renewed. We've had, for some reason, I guess life happens and you just forget to actually check to see if you've been renewed online. And as they are practicing, they could be going for months or a year or more until they realize that they haven't been renewed. What that means is they can't actually collect those hours, or the registrant, technically is practicing unlicensed. So it's kind of it's a problem. So one of the things we do in outreach is just to make sure people understand that that's one of the key things that they need to really pay attention to as a registrant, is make sure you renew your registration on time. Yes.
Does the board send anything out letting people know their registration is expired, or it's on them to track?
So we do send out renewal warnings 3 months in advance. We are actually looking at other ways to kind of assist in that. Right now, we're looking at a possibility of doing email notifications also to kind of, capture that, just to make sure it's more front and center for everyone, so they don't maybe they don't get their mail, the mail gets lost. I mean, that's a lot of mail. We have 30,000 registrants out there, 30,000 pieces of mail that go out. There's going to be some that get lost in the mail. So we're looking at other ways to kind of, preempt that. And I think one of the emailing might be a good way to kind of reminders. So,
Thank you.
and the other one too is that some people just don't understand that they have to take the law and ethics exam. That's a little less, but it does happen. And so what usually occurs is they're wondering, they've submitted their renewal fee, but not wondering why that they haven't been renewed. And it turns out they'll call later on, and lo and behold, it's because they didn't take the law and ethics exam. We try to capture those, and we actually send notices out that if we do receive a fee for renewal, we'll let them know that, we received your fee for your renewal, but we can't proceed because you need to take the law and ethics exam. So the nice thing about when you the first time you get into the law and ethics exam, or the first time you get your registration, and that first law and ethics exam you take or you sign up for, you can do that through the Breeze system. So you can automatically do that really quick to get into that exam. So it's kind of interesting. It's a good point to know. One of the big ones is people don't understand the 6-year limit of subsequent registration. And usually what happens in that situation is they will come up to a point where they are coming close to their 6th year and they're wondering why they haven't received their renewal notice, or they try to go online and renew and it won't let them. They contact the board and we have to explain to them. In those situations, what we do with subsequent registrations, those get processed, those have priority because they're simple to kind of process. So when we do get a subsequent registration application, we recognize the need to get those people registered again. So we put those as a kind of a forefront. But it does happen where people forget that they have to actually apply for that subsequent registration. So also, along with that subsequent registration, some people are unaware that you can't work in a non-exempt setting with the subsequent registration. And that does cause complications. If you've been working in a non-exempt setting and gaining your hours, and you still haven't gotten your hours, it's a problem. I understand the anxiety over that, since then you will have to actually find a whole new agency to work at to finish your hours. So that's one of the things we will be discussing through this whole licensing committee, is that, the 6-year rule for registration, the length of a registration. And then the last thing is sometimes because of either life circumstances, or you cannot find supervisors enough, or whatever it is, sometimes you can't gain all those hours, 3,000 hours within the 6-year limit. So that causes some problems, especially if you are working in a non-exempt setting. Anecdotally, I say anecdotally because the last time we did this kind of a review was about a year or two ago. But on average, it takes about 3 years to gain, on average, about 3 years to gain your hours. So just as a highlight there. But we do have people that have had registrations, multiple registrations, triple, 3 registrations or 4 registrations even. So some highlights on the California Law and Ethics exam. Really, it's a simple form to apply. So to be approved for the exam, and this is not talking about people who are applying from out of state. From out of state, you have to get fully vetted to actually be able to take this exam. This is for a registrant. So if you have a registration number that is either current, delinquent, or even canceled, you will be able to actually apply and take the law and ethics exam. So that's really the only requirement for an in-state registrant. And the California Law and Ethics exam, like I said before, you can take it every 90 days. The reason we do the 90-day, it's the cycle we like to keep a continuous examination cycle, and to be able to do that, we have to test. It's getting a little bit more into the exam stuff, so I won't go too far into this, but we have 4 different cycles of the exam. So that will allow us to actually allow the candidates every 90 days to take the exam, and we think that's better. So, each exam, I'll explain it a little bit more, I think, later on. I won't go into it, but that 90 days is it's so they can cycle through that one exam and take a different exam the next time. As I was explaining before, this is the complication and the very confusing thing is, when do I need to take the 12-hour course? So the best way what I always tell candidate or registrants is that if this is the first retake application that you are submitting after you have been renewed, you need to show proof of a 12-hour law and ethics course. And we will be talking extensively on this in the next discussion item. So that causes a lot of confusion. Still to this day, how many years it's been in place, since 2016, we still have to pause and actually figure out, does that person have to take the 12-hour law and ethics course? Very confusing. And one thing, the problem we face with that is it's tied to not your renewal, but it's tied to your retake of the exam, which you can take the exam 4 times. We'll talk more, but it's very confusing. So that's why we were trying to clarify that in the next discussion. The details, here's the details of the law and ethics exam. It is developed by the board and OPES. OPES is actually the DCA's Office of Professional Examination Services. They actually conduct all the workshops that go into making the exam. And it's a 50 scored questions and 25 pretest questions. And the pretest questions is they'll test it in one cycle, and then those will get added to the next cycle. They'll look at the performance of the questions and make sure that the actual exam content is valid. It takes 90 minutes. They have to actually take the exam. You can request accommodations if you need special accommodations, and sometimes one of those accommodations could be, extended time. And the current pass rate, as you can see, on average, it's about, it's like 75 to 80%. On average, pass rate. And on the bottom there, you can see how many exams we actually give this year so far. So it's quite a few exams. But the pass rate is pretty good. Is there any questions on this exam or? Nope. Okay. And next slide. Kind of going over just really quick on the issues, similar to what we put before on the registration. That people sometimes forget, and registrants sometimes forget that the law and ethics is needed for renewal. There's the confusion of when you take the 12-hour course, when that is needed. The other thing too is we don't really have a limit as to the amount of exam attempts on the law and ethics. There is really nothing that stops them from taking the exam in perpetuum. You could have a canceled registration and not wanting to even move on to the next step, but because you have a canceled registration, you could take the exam. The only time that you actually would have to retake the exam over is if you apply for and get into the clinical exam, and after 7 years from the first attempt, if you haven't passed the clinical exam within 7 years from the first attempt, you have to go back and take the current law and ethics exam. So there's really the only mechanism that kind of expires that score. And I can talk about that here, I guess, now too. Is our concern with that is that, you know, you're testing people. You could be testing right now, and 7 years down the line, you're still not applying for licensure and getting into clinical. In essence, that test is kind of stale. I mean, there's new practice acts. I mean, new code of ethics, maybe. There's a whole bunch of new stuff that you should probably be tested on again. So really, that kind of poses a problem for us. The other thing about the 12 the law and ethics is it does prevent people from getting that subsequent registration, and that could be a really bind for some. You know, you're at your 6th year and you can't pass that exam. You can't collect hours, depending on your, you know, depending on where you're working. You might not be able to work because of that. So that really kind of, it's kind of a, I want to say a penalty, but it causes some problems for some registrants. And on the bottom there, the bottom part is what I was kind of talking about, the 7-year rule. Really, unless you get into the clinical exam, you could really, that score, first of all, that score you get for the law and ethics is good for forever. And then also, you know, you can keep taking that exam. You might not want to even get licensed, but you could just keep taking that exam and this is the nefarious reason, possibly you're working for somebody to farm questions. And that's our big concern for the exam security, on having somebody be able to take the exam as much as possible. So let's say you've gone through the process, you've collected your 3,000 hours, and now you're ready to take that clinical exam. So when you submit your application, you're submitting a whole bunch of different paperwork. You're submitting your supervisory plan, which is a agreement between you and your supervisor of how they're going to, you know, process the supervision with you. You have a supervisor responsibility statement where your supervisor signs before you start supervision. They sign that they recognize all of their responsibilities. You will submit either a volunteer letter or W-2s to show either you were volunteering in an agency where you're receiving your supervision, or you're actually working for the agency. You have most importantly, the experience verification forms. And then written agreements. The written agreements you might have, it's if you have a third-party supervisor, they work with the agency to show that they are contracted with that supervisor to be able to supervise you. Currently, right now, it's $500 for LMFTs and $250 for LPCCs and LCSWs, because they have a different clinical exam that's not sponsored by it's not created by the board. So they have to actually pay their exam fee to other agencies. So here's the term 6-year rule. We have another 6-year rule. It's so funny. We have 6-year rule. We have law and ethics courses that range between our requirements and such, but this 6-year rule is really important. So when we will count any supervised hours that you have gained within the previous 6 years from the date we receive your application for licensure. So those are the hours that we will count. It's a little bit different for LMFTs, because LMFTs can count some of their practicum hours. So that's you know, good to know. And just to highlight again, I don't know why I put this up here, but just for your knowledge and edification here, we received about 6,000 applications last year for licensure, and our licensed population sees 86,000. So the one thing I'd like to kind of mention on this is this year we received an incredible, I got to keep mentioning this because it's a hot spot right now, is we received an incredibly large amount of applications, LMFT applications, on December, because some applicants were getting in before there was a change in how we actually count hours. And on average, we were receiving anywhere from I average about 200 applications a month. In December, before the 31st, we received 1,000 applications. So if anybody is currently listening on this, that they have their application that's back through December, we've finally broken through the December applications and are working on January now. Our LMFT people over there, God bless them, working their hearts out. So thank you for your patience. So what do we see? What do we run into with the licensing applications? I think the big thing we do have is the deficiencies. Anecdotally, I want to say that always because I haven't done any complete stats, but I can tell you about 20 to 30% of our applications are deficient. And you know that for us, that doubles the workload, causes confusion. And I think it's not usually it's not about hours. I think it's not that they don't have enough, they're not deficient in hours. It's usually the other paperwork that's missing. The W-2s is a big thing, supervisory agreements and such. So it's really kind of the paperwork that is deficient. So, and what we'll do if the application is deficient, we send out a letter specifically stating what they need to send back, and they will do that. In the past few years, we've been starting to do really utilizing email to kind of get that word out with deficiencies, and actually working on when we can receive this stuff electronically for deficiencies. We've been clearing them that way too, to kind of expedite the matter, because we want to get people moved on as fast as possible. There's confusion usually at this point about the 6-year rule of supervision and how that works with your 6 years of your registration. I think people sometimes have confusion thinking that if you have your current registration and it cancels, that those hours will not count. And that's not the case. It's kind of the 6-year rule for the clinical application is kind of like a revolving wheel. We don't look really at the registration number. You could have 1, 2, or 3 registration numbers. Well, it wouldn't, I guess, work out mathematically because of that. But you could have 2 registration numbers. And what we're really concerned about is, first of all, that you had a registration number that when you were collecting those hours, and that they were 6 years from when you actually applied. So that might span between 2 registration numbers. That does cause some confusion out there, the 2 6-year rules. For us internally, it's gotten better over the years, but it's time consuming and it's tedious for the evaluation and calculation of all the supervised hours. What we used to have is a lot more what we used to call buckets. So just the various types of supervision. I mean, it was not like we have now, clinical, non-clinical. It was, clinical working in certain settings, and you can only reach this max, and if you reach that max, then you had to do this. So it was very confusing, but it's getting better over the years. It still requires a lot of calculation and discernment, because what we experience is that you really can't get the supervision, it seems like right now, with one supervisor. You have to have multiple supervisors. And so compiling all that paperwork together and making sure that you do have all the required supervised hours can be very tedious. I think I'd like to also mention here really quick that this is, maybe we'll talk about this later on in the committee, is the other problem we see is people that have non-qualifying degrees. We have especially with like LPCCs, we've noticed it. But either your degree was obtained quite a while ago, or one of the things we see, it didn't contain the right amount of units per se. It wasn't one cohesive program you went through. We do have a lot of not necessarily confusion, but a lot of it's tough to deny those applications. But we have to, because the law doesn't, because of the law, we have to have follow the law. So hopefully we can talk about that at a future licensing committee, because we do have the ability to, I think it's actually lies within the executive officer to review education and make the final decision. But I think we need to kind of look at that later on to see how we really want to process those non-qualifying degrees, if there's a better way to actually look at it. Lastly, which Roseanne's been doing a lot of work, we keep doing a lot of work on understanding the appropriate settings for supervision. We get a lot of questions about, people questioning whether a certain site will be okay for supervision. So we'll keep clarifying those, and hopefully it'll get easier to understand and broaden that ability. So, any questions on any of that stuff? Nope, didn't lose you yet? Not getting too bored?
No,
Okay.
Steve, you did a really good job in trying to delineate, actually you have already described, how the whole licensing process and at each state, what the problems are. So
Okay.
I think down the road, it will make sense when we start looking at, say, like, whether it's about like the, whatever the years rule, the 90 days rule, the 6 years rule, the 7 years rules. It's actually really super confusing. And so I think, thank you for setting this stage up, so for the public and also the board members to understand, where the problem come from.
Okay, I got just a couple more things and then so hopefully,
Okay.
thank you.
So, you're welcome.
Clinical exam specs. So LMFTs are the only, I put LEPs, and I apologize if any LEPs are working. It's so funny. I didn't really concentrate on LEPs because we don't have as many issues, honestly, with the LEP. It's pretty straightforward. But the LMFTs are the only license type that we actually, LEP and LMFTs are the only license type that we develop the exams for in collaboration with the Office of Professional Examination Services. But for LMFTs, the scored questions, we have 150 scored questions. There are 25 pre-tests, so you have to take 175 questions in total. You have 240 minutes to do that, or 4 hours, and you can retake the exam every 120 days. Currently, you can see we have a pass rate of 77%, which is pretty good, and 4,300 exams we gave last year, even during COVID, so it's a lot of exams. The LPCCs and LCSWs, actually, they take their clinical exam. Those are national exams. The LPCC, they do the National Board for Clinical Counselors actually administer that or design that exam, and the Center for Credentialing and Education are the people that actually issue that exam and work with an exam vendor. Also, the Association of Social Work Boards is the board that develops the exam for social workers. You can see that their exam is kind of based almost exactly like ours, 240 minutes, 150 questions, 20 pre-tests. And it's kind of unique. It's nice to have the national exam recognition for the LCSWs and LPCCs. This year we are going to begin looking at the national exam for the LMFTs. The Association of Marriage and Family Therapy Regulatory Boards actually gives a national exam for LMFTs, and so we're looking at the efficacy of using that one too for our LMFTs, so that they can get they can have that national exam. Yes, Wendy.
So does this come into play when you talk about being able to practice in other states? Because whether you took a national exam or a state-specific exam, does that come into some of the discussion we've had on that?
Yeah, it makes it. I mean, it definitely makes it easier for somebody to transfer out. And then it makes this easier for us to, people that are coming in, especially like LCSWs coming in, to actually accept them. I know we have, for ASWs and the MBCC, I think it's flat. I should have put on there how many states actually participate in that, but I think we're always the last man out. It seems like we're the last state out. So for LMFTs, I know that we do have that where they try to go to another state, and the state will require more more from them because they didn't take the national exam. They'll want to see, you know, supervised hours, or they want to really kind of put more restrictions on them. So it does help for our licensees if they have that exam to be able to go elsewhere. So
Thank you.
we have looked at the LMFT exam before. It's been a continual type of thing we've looked at. We're just doing it once again to see maybe this is the right time. So you'll be seeing that within we're beginning to look at it this year, and probably next year there'll be a report. Gosh, it's really wild to think next year. So that's a little bit about the exam, the clinical exam. And so what we see, you know, the clinical exam, the big thing that we see there is candidates maintaining their eligibility. You have a year from the day that you get approved for the exam, or a year from the last time you took the exam to participate again. You have to participate in the exam once a year, once you are approved, until passed. I think this is a tough one because for us, I mean, that's in law. And if you miss your time frame to take your exam, what happens is you'll have to actually reapply for licensure and have all of your supervised experience hours reevaluated. And you can imagine if you've been in the exam maybe once or twice and you forget to take it, you're going to be missing out possibly a couple years of supervised experience. And so we don't have the ability to get you back in the exam. So that's really, for us, for me, I know personally, it is kind of a heartache to try to say, you know, there's nothing we can do. Yes, Wendy?
So that's where the 6 years comes in with the supervised hours. So if it's some of those hours that have started to fall off by that point. So then do they have to go back and redo those supervised hours before they can come back and take the clinical exam again?
They would have to.
Okay.
Yeah, they would have to. That's why it's like these deadlines, it's like so important to remember that, especially when you get into clinical, you do not want to miss out on your time. But I mean, I recognize, and we'll probably be discussing stuff in the future about this too, and you see down there, people will ask for extensions, you know, wanting extensions, but there's no mechanism for me legally to grant an extension. And, you know, it's very tough too, especially if it's you know, we have people that, you know, for some reason they forgot, or it could be a medical reason, it could be a major life circumstance, waited till the last minute, and that one final day before your expiration date, you got into a serious accident or something. There's really no mechanism to say, you know, we'll honor you an extension. And so it's something I think you might hear some, you know, discussions about that and some public comment. And I think it's something to look at. I'm not sure what we can do, but something to consider. The one thing I know that we're considering on this end is going back to kind of communication, is really communicating and possibly putting out warnings to these candidates that, you know, you have this many months until you can take the exam. So please sign up. That's what I'm looking at, because I personally don't like getting in those situations, because it's a lot of work if you have to actually go back and collect those hours. Hopefully you've been working as a registrant and you're still collecting those hours. That's why I actually tell people, you know, there's been always a question is, do I need to collect hours while I'm in the exam cycle, the clinical exam cycle? You know, as a security measure, I would say if you have the ability with your supervisor to keep marking down those days, please do, because it could happen that where you need to go back and submit hours again. So the one big thing that we've been, I get consistent communications on is I didn't put that on there, is the California accepting the licensed marriage and family therapist, the AMFTRB national exam. got a lot of licensees that are coming to me asking if we can get them into the AMFT RB exam, but there's no way for me to do that because we don't participate in that. So I can't get them into the LMFT national exam. So that's one of the confusions we have. The other one, we will be talking about this, is the exam for the LPCCs, the National Clinical Mental Health Counselor exam, the NCMHCE. It took me a while to ring that off, and NCMHCE. That exam, there's been some confusion because you can actually take the NCMHCE without getting approved by us, without having your supervised hours or experience evaluated and meeting the requirements that are necessary that we say to get into the clinical exam. You can actually take that, I think it's once you get your master's degree, you could sign up for that and say that it's really meant, if you're going into the clinical exam to do that without getting approved by us, it's really for a certification that you're looking at through NBCC and not for licensure. So right now, the stance we have is that we cannot accept those. We can't accept those exam scores because they didn't go through the actual required process that we have established in law. So that has been some confusion. Like I said down there, candidates requesting extension of exam eligibility. There's no real mechanism for us to do that. Neither two. It's really something that I think we need to work on there is just notifying and more communication with the expiration of eligibilities because we really don't have the ability, nor I don't really. It'd be tough for us to get into business to, decide who gets an extension and who doesn't. I mean, that's something that really, I don't like to be arbitrary on those things. I mean, it's in law, so having that ability, I don't know if we really want it, but I think we can do a better job of communicating when those, when those eligibilities are running out. And below, kind of talked about that. California exam may not be recognized by other jurisdictions. So, when they apply for a license in New York, they might say, "Great, you've taken the California Law and Ethics exam or California clinical exam, but you have to take our exam, the national exam, or you have to show that you've met all these supervision requirements." So, any questions? Okay. I think we're almost done here. Oh, hey, questions. I guess there's one more thing, actually, especially, so after you pass the clinical exam, that is not the last application that you have. So I think that's another thing. It's better now, but really you have to submit the final fee and the application so that we can issue your license. I don't know if that's something we want to tackle in this, or I don't even know how to really work that, but sometimes it catches people up. They pass the exam, they're all excited, then they're wondering where their license is. And a couple months later, I'm like, oh, well, you didn't submit the fee. So I know that we've kind of worked on communication with, it was really happening with ASWB because they're unsure of what to do at that point. Things have gotten better, and we don't see that too much. But it's still a problem out there. You do have that one last fee to put in, even though you've been through the process, you've passed, you're so excited, one more fee. So that's all I got. I hope that I gave you some information. So I think for this committee, really the 6-year rules that we'll be looking at, the 12-hour course is really kind of pertinent right now. And then depending on where we go in the future, definitely there'll be more conversations about some of those issues that I laid out there. So hope that was useful.
Yes. Sorry.
Go ahead, Wendy.
I didn't want to speak out of turn, but Steve, I just wanted to really thank you. I'm sure for my colleagues, this is information they're well versed in as licensed clinicians in their own fields. I just appreciate it very much as a public member. as we're looking at some of these issues to really understand the process and the complications that arise as we go. So I just want to really appreciate and thank you for your work on that.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
And that's exactly right. I think this is such a, good, 1 hour course, to really just talk about like, the general issues, and how they actually interrelated with each other. And so, I think this is actually a really good presentation, for the board member, before, for the, strategic planning upcoming, because, that actually identifies some really wonderful, potential, that whether it's about clarification or changing some of the law, I think that's actually, really helpful. Even for me, it's like just revisiting. It's like, yes, there are just so many different layers. And so I think that's absolutely, helpful for, for the board members. So, Diana, you have any comments?
Nope, I was just following it all, making sure that it's exactly how I remember it to be. So yeah, nope, I think it was a good overview of kind of where we're at and hopefully highlighting what are the issues that we need to look at moving forward.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and this is also just, one of the pathways, because, there's also the out of state, so it's actually a really wonderful overview program, and also to show the public that, there are many challenges, because of how the law's written that the staff are facing, every day. And so as a board, I think we do have the responsibility, to just help clarify, to really set the standard. And so thanks, Steve, for that. And I'm sure that, like I say, the out of state is another one you can probably do it, and, at some other time.
And then I recommend, I just went through the real basics, but there's some really good handbooks for future LCSWs, LMFTs, and LPCCs that are put out there on our website. It really gives you the coursework and everything. Excellent resource. So I would check those out too.
Absolutely. So I want to just open to the public, at this time, for this particular portion of the overview of the licensing process, and, see if you have any questions for Steve. And so moderator, okay, so Sabina, I see your face. So, I think I can open it for question, right? Or should I just close it?
If you'd like, this is just an overview agenda item, just providing a basic overview for the information to get everybody up to speed and know what we are going to be talking about.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there's opportunity. I'm not sure if there's, if you obviously can always do public comment if you want. However, we have another overview topic, which is next, that might be more relevant for that opportunity.
Right. So, so Sabina, in a very nice way, redirected me to probably save the public comment piece at the very end. And I think that probably would be a good, place to basically hear everything and then, summarize your suggestion or comments. Some of them that Steve may be able to answer down the road. Some of them maybe we can't. But thank you, Sabina. I listen. See? All right, so let's move to the next agenda item, which is the overview of the role and responsibility, for the licensing committee. Roseanne?
Yes.
Please.
So that Steve gave a great overview of the licensing process. And so one of the things we did as part of our first meeting back in March was to kind of list and identify some topics that are sort of areas where some changes or clarifications to the law might be needed. So that is what you see on this list, is a list of issues for discussion. And as this committee, as time goes on, as we continue this committee, you will see these topics coming up on the agenda. So for example, today, at the last meeting, we started talking about the 12-hour California law and ethics course requirement. And so today we're continuing that particular piece. So these are varying in size and complexity. Some of the items might just be a one meeting discussion. The 6-year limitation on registration numbers and the reasoning behind that, that's a huge topic. that's fairly controversial, so that might require multiple discussions. We also want to possibly include a discussion of life coaching and pastoral counseling and how that fits, because that's something that comes up. Discussion eventually of the national LMFT exam, as we're doing a review on that right now. Things like that. So you'll see that on that, the topics on the list that we're planning on tackling. You know, at any time, other things can be added to the list if there's areas of concern. If there's a preference to tackle, you know, to prioritize one, we can address that as well. So that I just every time we have this committee meeting, I'm planning on bringing this list so that we can add to it and kind of gauge our progress and we don't forget anything. That's all I have.
Thank you so much, Roseanne. So being said, you know, we can easily move into our next agenda item, which is to talk about that, let's see, that will be talking about that 12 hours, the education requirement for the law and ethics examination. So please continue.
Okay.
You have the floor.
So as I mentioned, the 12-hour California Law and Ethics course requirement for registrants with a failing score on the California Law and Ethics exam. That is our topic for today. Continued over from the last meeting. It's a pretty big area of discussion. So as Steve mentioned, the board requires its LMFT, LCSW, and LPCC registrants to take the California Law and Ethics exam, a minimum of once each renewal period until passed. Once they pass it, they're done, but they need to attempt it at least once each renewal period. If they fail it, then they are still permitted to renew their registration, but they need to show proof of completing a 12-hour California Law and Ethics course in order to be able to participate in the exam in the next renewal cycle. And the thought behind that, when the board implemented this several years back, is that these individuals as associates are treating clients, so they should either demonstrate a knowledge of law and ethics or be taking coursework to demonstrate that they are working to better their knowledge of California law and ethics. So a registration can be renewed up to 5 times. After those 5 times have passed in the 6th year, the applicant cannot obtain a subsequent registration number until they have passed the California Law and Ethics exam. And the reasoning behind that being that, you know, if they've had 6 years to attempt to pass it, and they should by that time be able to demonstrate a knowledge of California law and ethics. So the staff has observed over time since this requirement became effective in 2016 that the timing of when the 12-hour course is required has been problematic for registrants. And the reasoning kind of for that, there's some issues with the 12-hour law and ethics course that possibly need reviewing. Registrants get confused on when they need to take it. So upon failure of their exam, once they go to renew their registration, they're allowed to do that, but then they have to take the 12-hour course before they can take the exam again. So what happens is they might forget to do this, and then in the next renewal cycle, they go to take the California Law and Ethics exam because they need to renew again, and they haven't taken the course. And so they can't take the exam until they take the course, and they also cannot renew until they take the exam. So it can become kind of an emergency if the person is not paying attention to when that needs to be taken. And in addition, the cost of a registration renewal is about $150 per year. The test is $150 per test. So taking a required course does result in an additional cost to registrants. Looking at kind of some providers, I took a look at how much they're charging for that course. It ranges typically from between about $50 to about $135. So that's an extra cost every year, you know, until you pass the exam. And Steve provided some pass rates earlier. There's some pass rates provided in attachment A as well. So at the last committee meeting, the committee directed staff to develop a couple of different language scenarios. So we have the scenario shown in attachment B, and that would require the 12-hour California Law and Ethics course to be taken as a condition of registration renewal if the law and ethics exam is failed, instead of renewing and then having to take it in order to take it the exam again. So it would change the timing a little bit. And we have to add some sort of legal fixes into that language saying notwithstanding a certain section for recommendation of legal counsel, things like that. But you can find that particular draft language in attachment B. The other possibility that the committee was interested in is the possibility of deleting the 12-hour California law and ethics course requirement for those who failed to pass the exam completely. Instead, there was the thought that it might be helpful to require all registrants to complete a minimum of 6 or possibly 3. There was some disagreement on the hours, but hours of continuing education in California law and ethics each renewal period, regardless of whether they had passed the California law and ethics exam. So that language is shown in attachment C. So that language would probably need a little work if we decided to pursue that. There's some needing to decide on the number of hours of the course. There would be some need to add some mechanisms in the law for continuing education. We would need to, you see that for MFTs 4980.54 would need to be brought in because currently the law only lists the authority for CE for licensees. So we would need to do some updating so that we could audit and things like that for our registrants. So that's attachment C. I did get a little bit of feedback from the department from OPES, which is the Office of Professional Exam Services, who brought up a point that another option for that would be that it might be a little bit much to require, the profession doesn't change necessarily so much in a year. Maybe at the 5-year mark upon the second registration renewal might be appropriate, but that also might be too much time. So it's kind of finding that balance. But that was an interest. I thought an interesting and good point, worthy of some discussion. So with that, I'll open it up for comments.
I like it. Diana, go ahead.
So just my quick comment on that is I do agree that the law doesn't change that much in a year, except the idea is that we are wanting to make sure the people who didn't have the information last year get the information this year. So it's not like we're saying, oh, you passed the exam and now you have to, do this extra bit more than what.
Diana, for whatever reason, you're muted.
There we go.
For me, it says I'm not muted.
Oh, now you're not muted.
Can you hear me now?
Uh-huh.
Okay, boy, mine showed that I wasn't muted, so sorry. So I agree that the year, the law doesn't change a lot in a year, but we want to be able to ensure that registrants who are practicing and haven't passed the exam have updated information. If they didn't pass last year, I've got greater concern that now they're practicing this year, even though they didn't pass last year. While they're still students, they're being monitored by their educational institution and they're being monitored by their agency and supervisors. Post-degree, now they're just at their agency with their supervisor and they're still not passing that exam. That's worrisome to me. So I do like the idea of you don't pass the exam, you do take these CEs until you pass the exam at least. That's my thought.
And Diana, that's exactly the idea. When we originally, the board talked about, why we require that 12 hours law and ethics examination. And so, and it was really a wonderful thought. But I also see that, after, some years of practice implementation now, it really, has that issue because of how do we track them? How do we, ensure that they, remember? So I think theoretically, it's really wonderful. Because I think I was part of that to say, yeah, let's get them to do the CE, and yet, I think that becomes like implementation wise, it's just really challenging, for the staff. And I think for, from the last, the last licensing committee, that's really where the thought is. It's like, how can we make it just consistent? right? And so, there, and here comes the option, the attachment C, that language, it's really to see, maybe, we can require, that all of them, all of the registrant, to take a 6 or 3 hours, that law and ethics examination for every renewal period. And, so that, down the road, when they're licensed, they will still need to take that 6 hours anyway for per renewal period. And so that becomes like, for one, very consistent across board. And it's not become like an additional, burden on the staff, but also ensure that, that every year for the registrants, they're able to have that, update, the need of the update information like you mentioned. So, so to me, it's like, of course, yeah, that was my idea. I love it. So, 3 hours, I can, I can sit with that, see 3 or 6, 3 hour, I think it's okay. And so, so I would love that attachment C. I think the language is, very consistent with what we talked about last time. And so, yeah, so that's my thought. So Diana, go ahead.
And I know, Roseanne, you brought up the cost, the added cost of having to take this course every year, but there are ways they could take it for $15 or less. If we're talking about a 3-unit, there's even approved agencies that are offering it for free. They do an annual law and ethics, an updated California law and ethics 3-unit class for free. And so everybody can take that. So we don't have to worry about the added cost.
That's great to know.
Yes. There are actually a lot of competition out there. And so, so there's quality, the quantity, still there's the option of video, hard reading material. So I think the cost, can definitely be a concern. But if it's like a standard, I mean, it's something that I think licensees or registrant will need to get used to it. It's not just about the cost. It's really about the intention of getting, keeping them updated. And so, I think that supersedes, the concern about the cost. And, of course, the wages and stuff, that's another, issue. But I think, I'm glad that we put it out and open, to mention it so that the licensees or registrants know that we do take it into consideration. Wendy, do you have any comments?
No, I think I would agree with kind of the direction that both of you are speaking about, the attachment C and maybe with the 3-hour requirement. And I think I remember from the discussion before, this kind of helps with, I think we had part of the discussion, even folks who have been practicing a while who haven't had to take a law and ethics exam. This kind of helps keep everybody fresh. So it's not just targeted at new applicants. So I think I like that particular solution.
Right. So looks like we're definitely leaning more towards, the option, the attachment C. And now, so Roseanne, I want to come back to you first. I want to just make sure that we touch on everything, before we, I open for the public comments. So anything else that we need to address here, amongst the board members?
No, I don't think so. I think that the main thing you would need to address is if you like the language in attachment C, it sounds like you're leaning toward the 3-hour requirements. We need a decision there on 3 versus 6. And then we'd need to decide whether it comes back to this committee again, or it goes, if it's ready to go to Policy and Advocacy Committee. The only thing I would warn is I do need to consult before the language goes to P&A, and it can go to P&A that way. I would need to consult with our legal counsel to make sure that all of the correct authorities for CE can be done via statute, or if we would need a reg change too. I believe it can all be done via statute, but I would just need to double check that. Make sure we have all of our legal bases covered.
Absolutely. So, so it means that, if you need to, I mean, the language will have to be cleaned up, so
Yeah,
it might have a little bit more, just in case that, to cover all the other statutes or whatnot that, that you're cleaning up at the same time.
Yeah, if we're really sure about pursuing that option, then we need to make sure we dot all of our I's and cross all of our T's on that one.
Absolutely. So in that sense, I would really suggest the committee, to take a clear look, at the, at the language, and then see if that is acceptable. So it looks like it will be on page 9, right, Roseanne?
Right.
Yes. So the page 9, and and we can take a look at the language and see if we like it. Whether it covered, the intention of what we want to, what the intention of the, the discussion. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
can note in 4980.54, that's our general CE. I've added in registrants in terms of people that would take CE. In terms of renewing a registration, you would need to take the 3 hours. It looks to me like the authority to audit would already apply to them based on the way it's written. So I think that's good. We would just, like I said, need to run it through legal. So yeah.
Yes, to do some cleanup. Yeah. So Diana and Wendy, any questions about the language? Good, very good. I think we're very effective here. So now I'm gonna just again, I was kind of like stirring the pot last time, and so I think I would like to do also just expedite the process. So let me just make a motion to for to recommend to to adopt the language on attachment C, and for the and to with the 3 hours instead of the 6. And I don't know if that is a good motion, but Roseanne, you can probably tell me, and then I will.
I think that you would want to say motion recommend options, recommend staff finalize language drafting option C with the 3 hour requirement, run it by legal for final legal approval, and then recommend that it go to the policy and advocacy committee for consideration.
Perfect. See, I see the thumbs up from Sabina. So that's my motion. So I need a second. Diana?
I'll second that.
Okay.
Yep.
Wonderful. So, in that sense, let's open it up for the public comments and then see where, any other feedback from the public. And moderator, please.
This is the moderator. We've opened the Q&A icon or the Q&A panel. If you'd like to make a comment, use the Q&A icon located on your screen. Click on it and type comment into the text field and submit that. Or you can also locate that small hand icon on your screen and click that to raise your hand. Our first comment is going to come from Ben Caldwell. Ben, your line is open. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you, committee members and staff. Just wanted to express support for the direction this discussion has taken. This may come as a surprise since I'm a CE provider who does the 12-hour course, but I actually think that for a variety of practical and logistical reasons, it makes more sense to require 3 hours of law and ethics CE content at each associate registration renewal. So I wanted to say thank you, appreciate the thoughtfulness of the conversation, and that's a good direction to go policy-wise.
Thank you, Ben. Love to hear the support from you. We have no idea, no intention to, to affect your business. Jen.
And our next comment comes from Jen Alley. Jen, your line is open. You'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. This is Jennifer Alley with CAMP. This has been a great discussion, and I'm going to align my comments with Ben. We also agree or recommend that the associates take a 3-hour course every year at renewal. We think that this mirrors the same number of hours for licensed individuals. As you know, LMFTs take a 6-hour course every 2 years, so 3 years every year would kind of mirror the same amount of education. And if there were cost burdens, expressed by the, associates or with the committee, then, perhaps a 6-hour course every other year, which might be harder to track for the department. But again, thank you for the thoughtful discussion, and I think we're moving in the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. Any other comments, moderator?
I am not seeing any other requests at this time. If I can just please remind Jen to lower her hand.
Looks like we have one more.
Oh, we do.
Leslie. Yeah.
Leslie, your line is open. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Leslie Esamwanga-Sheremy. I'm also known as AMFT 119265 and previously 54575 and also 39138, and I'm camped 61223. So I come from a long history of numbers. I'm here to request that you review my request to be eligible to sit for the MFT clinical exam. I have taken the non-traditional path to obtaining my MFT hours. I did graduate.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Excuse me. I think this is not the, this is, we're discussing, the motion right now.
Oh, sure.
So I would really recommend you, to maybe, contact, our EO Steve Sullivan, in regarding your, your approval of hours.
I was directed to this forum by BBS email probably 2 or 3 months ago.
Yes. I'm sorry. We still have a public comment period after this. Sheremy, so that would probably be the best place to.
Oh,
you can
sure.
actually
Absolutely.
answer.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that would be a much better time, appropriate time to bring up your concern. So thank you so much. Any other comments?
And with that, that was our last request. I will close the panel.
Thank you very, very much. So I love to hear the support from the, from the stakeholders. And so it looks like, this is a very doable and, we have the support, from our association. So in that sense, I think we're ready to vote. So Christina, please.
Here's the roll call. Wendy Strack,
Yes.
Diana Herwick,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. So we have a, fairly short discussion. So I think this concludes our discussion item. And so the next section definitely is the public comment for items not on the agenda. And so moderator, would you please open the Q&A panel?
This is the moderator. I've again opened the Q&A panel and our hand raise feature is open. If you'd like to make a public comment for items not on today's agenda, please indicate so by raising your hand or clicking on the Q&A icon and sending a comment for a request for comment. Our first request comes from Christine Nguyen. Christine, your line is open. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So my name is Christine Nguyen. I'm an associate marriage and family therapist, and I wanted to kind of bring up to the attention that my number is still pending. And I was one of those who sent in my application in January during the peak of the pandemic. I'm in the unique but by no means enviable position of being able to attend this enormously valuable meeting due to not being employed and not having family obligations or members to care for. I am aware that others in my position, they don't have this chance, and that they're similarly falling through the cracks due to there being almost no way to contact a live representative and emails taking weeks or months to be responded to if they are at all. And my concern is wondering how BBS communicates with the public. I'm curious if BBS plans to address public responsiveness or if it's possible at all to restructure or outsource this enormous workload so there's less stress and all involved. Because I've had to resubmit my application with corrections to the check amount, which changed in January, and found that my check was cashed on March. So I know my application must have been received, but it's now July and I still don't have my associate's number. And I don't know where my application is. And until I attended this meeting, I didn't even know that there was that severe a backlog from this specific December, because the only time frame given from anyone who responded to me was 4 to 6 weeks from the cashing of the check. So I've done everything in my power. I've emailed, I've called, I've reached out on Facebook, I've checked BBS and Breeze every week, and I've had no responses on any of those, except for Facebook Messenger, which only rerouted me back to email, and I still didn't get a response from there. So due to the way our field is structured, we're kind of entirely reliant on BBS for the rest of our career. And Unfortunately, I see that despite the members caring very deeply, taking their job seriously, it's very disconnecting, and a lot of the public struggles to actually interact with BBS, to advocate for ourselves should anything else go wrong, which clearly, from reading the presentations, there's a lot of places where this could go wrong, to no fault of anyone's own. And I don't feel it's very fair that all of us are in this position, not me and especially not BBS either, because we were all affected and struggling with the pandemic and the sheer demands of servicing our whole field. So I want to thank you for caring about us and your jobs, but I also know that BBS's reputation with the public and relationship with the public will continue to suffer indefinitely into the future until public responsiveness is changed. And I was just hoping if there was a way to restructure, again, communication with the public or else the workload so that there's less stress and all involved. And that concludes my.
Well, thank you very much, Christine. So, I just want to, acknowledge, the challenges, when you don't have the registration number, that's, making, finding job is just very, very difficult. And so, so that being said, I have, I'm sure that maybe Steve, would you like to kind of help out, Christine, and maybe provide the information how we can come, work with that, maybe just, ways that, she can communicate with the board?
Yeah, I'm not going to necessarily comment, but definitely, Christine, I'll see where things are going. I got your name, so let me look into that. So I'll definitely see where your application is.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Christine. And Roseanne, go ahead.
I would also just add really quickly, if for licensees that are registrants that have access to Facebook, our processing times are posted on Facebook every week so that you can see what day our evaluators are, or what dates our evaluators are working on, so you can know if your submittal date is upcoming. So that might also be helpful to some individuals as well.
Nice. Thank you so much for the information. Let's move to our next public comment. Moderator.
Our next comment comes from Leslie Chermy. Your line is open and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Leslie Asamoah Chermy, and I am AMFT 119265, and I was 34575 and 39138. Also, I'm a current count member. I'm here to request that you review my request to be eligible to sit for the MFT clinical exam, because I have taken the non-traditional path to obtaining MFT hours. I graduated, believe it or not, in 1999, 2000, and I've worked at all nonprofit agencies and volunteered my time the whole time since 1999, primarily working with addicts and alcoholics and their family members. I've worked at Salvation Army Rehab in Paris, Redlands Counseling Center, and in mental health systems, MHS, their outpatient drug court system, since May of 2005. It took me actually 15 years to get all my licensing hours. I had to turn them in 3 times because this is a population that has a big turnover. Working with addicts and alcoholics and their family members, they no-show, they reschedule, they disappear, they get kicked out of the program, they get sent to jail, to prison, they get sick, there's even suicides. It took a long time to get those hours, 3 times sending it in. And I was finally accepted in 2015 and took that law and ethics in 2016, and my test anxiety just kicked in bad. So I failed that. 2017, my mom got Alzheimer's, that care and decision and all that fell on my shoulders. 2018, I got cancer, surgery, my life changed forever. So I did take the law and ethics exam in 2019 after the Jerry Grossman requirement, and I failed it with my test anxiety again. But in 2020, I confronted that test anxiety and I passed the darn thing the 3rd time around on April 15th. I sent in my request to be eligible for the MFT clinical in December of 2020, and in January 21, I was told I was not eligible because I'd missed taking that law and ethics exam, which I've passed now. I mistaken it in 2017 and 2018, the Alzheimer's and cancer years. So I asked what to do, and I was told to redo my 2,500 licensing hours and supervision all over again. That would take me 6.5 to 7 years if I am to go back and do that all over again. I've already done all my hours. I've probably got more than double the required hours. I've got 20 years experience at this point, with 15 years of supervision with good qualified supervisors.
15 seconds.
This has been the non-traditional path. I'm here to stay. I'm not quitting. And I work with a really highly shame-based population, which includes also LGBTQ population, working with different minorities, and I'm
Time has
volunteering my
expired.
time with all of them.
Thank you so much. So, so I think that's, any other comments?
That's all of them for now.
Yes. So, thank you very much. So I would like to move to our next agenda item, which is the suggestion for future agenda item. And so for the board members, any other suggestion?
I don't have a suggestion for future agenda items. I just have a question. It sounded like one of those public commenters was directed to come to the board to make that request. I'm not really sure what authority we have there or why they were directed to the board. Is that something that staff's going to follow up with that individual then? Okay.
I'd say since this is a public forum and people might have concerns and comments about the board, if it gets to a point where we can't address them any longer, they can vocalize, the concerns, and so we try to direct them to specific committees or board meetings that will kind of address those issues. So,
Thank you for the clarification.
Right. So, so it sounds like we don't have any particular suggestion. So I think at this time, we will come to item number 9, which is always my favorite, or everybody's favorite item. Is called the adjournment. So the time now is 3:07 p.m. and we will be concluded. Our meeting has concluded, and thank you so much for your participation, and also want to thank the staff for the wonderful work that has done, to help us with this meeting. So we will see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks, Christina.
Thank you so much. Yeah.